everybody, to Joplin, Missouri and GNPI, and another episode of Faith Greater Than Fear. We've had over 50 of these now, and since March, we've had opportunities to talk to young and old, people local and international, in the business community and in ministry about what God is teaching them and how He's using their faith to help in their family, their neighborhood, and their communities, and their business sectors and influences and environments of how to be stronger than the elements of fear. And boy, there's plenty of that around. So we've got a very special guest today, and Jennifer Johnson. Jennifer is a good longtime friend. Her family knows some of my extended family as well. So Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So Jennifer, tell us where you're at in the inner sanctum of where in Tennessee?
I am down in the depths of one of the buildings on the campus of Johnson University in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm in my office near my team. We have a print shop as well as design here at Johnson. And so we need a big space for that. So we've been put down in the basement. So we just kind of hide down here and try to get our work done. So.
You are in communication. That's your heart. That's your passion. That's your experience in all kinds of ways. Communicate to us. First of all, how this journey through the pandemic has affected you, maybe in some interesting ways as a person of faith, your family, and then your colleagues. So tell us, oh wise one.
Sure. Well, everybody, whatever was happening to them, whatever stuff was going on in their lives when the pandemic started, that's the hand they were dealt on March 13th that they got to play out for the last 6 months. And so my particular hand was, we had one, our oldest he had just finished his junior year at Johnson. So it was like the end of spring semester at Johnson. He's finishing up his junior year. Our youngest is in school up in Pennsylvania. So she was 10 hours, however many hundreds of miles away from us. And then Matt and I both work, my husband Matt and I both work at Johnson University. So that was where the chess pieces were when everything kind of happened to our country and to our world last spring. So what that meant for us was we had to figure out how to do our work and our ministry in a higher education setting in a rapidly changing environment, an environment that still continues to change very quickly. I do communications and marketing for the university. My husband does community engagement, or as he says right now, it's community disengagement, because he mostly just tells the community they can't come to campus and we can't come there. But so those were the kind of roles we were trying to fulfill professionally. And then, of course, trying to be good dad and stepmom to our oldest, who moved in with us in March when they closed the campus. And then our youngest stayed with her mom up in Pennsylvania. So it was a weird scenario, but no more weird than anybody else's. No more. In many ways, we feel very blessed. I mean, it's been difficult, as it has for everyone, to adjust to this reality that we're all dealing with. But we feel very blessed just that we have jobs, we have health insurance, we have food, we have a lot to be grateful for. But it did mean that we didn't get to see our youngest from Christmas until July, because it wasn't safe to bring her here. So that was kind of the particular challenges that we faced just as a family. And then, of course, as I mentioned, professionally, we were like thousands of higher education institutions across the country. We were trying to figure out what this meant for the safety and well-being of our students, for the integrity of our campus, our physical facilities, and the on-campus community that we have, and keeping people safe, while still maintaining our mission as a university to educate students. And so we sent, well, I won't bore you with all the details, but basically we did what we hoped was going to be a short-term shift to remote instruction. And then, of course, as it became clear that the pandemic was going to be a longer thing, we moved to remote instruction for the rest of the semester. And then students, of course, were then home all summer. So we sent students away mid-March, late March, and then welcomed them back to campus a few weeks ago. So we are having on-campus classes. We actually had a pretty strong enrollment class. Nobody knew what it was going to look like. There's a lot of students talking about not wanting to go to school right now, taking a gap year. I'm like, what are you going to do? You can wear masks there. You can wear masks here. You're going to be wearing a mask. So come get your freshman general ed out of the way. But we had a pretty strong freshman class, and so we welcomed them back at the end of August. And so far, it can change on a dime. But so far, we don't have that many cases on campus, and it's been manageable. And our students have been very respectful and compliant with the policies and the reopening plan that we developed as a senior leadership team. So. Yeah, so that's where we kind of are as an institution. We hope to be able to have on-campus classes until Thanksgiving, and then we will send everybody home and they can take their germs with them for the holidays and for the beginning of the flu season, and then hopefully we can bring them all back in January, right when they're most contaminated probably. But, that's what our plan is right now.
And like you said, it can all change tomorrow. But loved a couple of things you mentioned. Number one is to remind us here in America that it is bad, but it is really worse other places that don't have jobs, that have money that has to come just to buy tonight's supper. And there is hunger. There is a lot more struggle among a lot of other people, as we as Christians globally should continue to realize that and not be woe is me. There is some of that, but not as deep as some. And of course, for the families who've been either grossly affected with residual effects of the virus or have lost loved ones, there's that huge mourning loss. What do you think God is speaking to you first as a leader, as a mom, as a communicator in this intersection between the university and the churches and the parents that send those children? So first, Jennifer, personally, then your family, and then the community where you sit at that intersection. What are you perceiving?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it?
It is.
Well, and I don't want to get us too far afield, but I think, to answer honestly, and one of the good and the bad things about me is that I tend to be pretty direct. So I'll just be direct here. As I observe the many things that are going on in our nation right now, not just with the pandemic, but with some social justice issues and with the increasing polarization in our society, I've realized that there is a lot more anger in me than maybe I wanted to admit. I think, people have kind of default emotions that they go to under times of anxiety or stress or distress or whatever. And my go-to, I think, is anger. Now, that's great for getting stuff done. And that's great for kind of fueling, energy around a topic. But it's not really great for spiritual health. And as I've seen and watched things play out over the last 6 months, both with the pandemic and with some of the other issues that we as a nation are facing and that we're facing as a church, I've really had to struggle with my gut reactions to people with whom I don't agree, perhaps, or with decisions or policies, or you name it. We could all have our list of things that we find personally difficult in these times. And so I'm having to learn as a Christian, as a Jesus follower, it's okay to be angry. In fact, I think there's sometimes when that anger is justified, but learning how to channel that in ways that are more productive than just doom scrolling on social media, or and learning to keep my mouth shut on social media, because it's that's always so helpful. People definitely change their minds when you argue with them on Facebook. So I think personally that's what I've had to. It's kind of brought up. I think this pandemic and some of the other things going on have kind of brought out our best selves, but also our worst selves. And I think we're seeing great examples of people sacrificing and being community-minded and choosing to love others in concrete ways. But I think we're also seeing some of the bad side. And so one of the shadow sides for me that surfaced is that I just get really annoyed with people. I think for our family, it was actually really healthy. I don't think any of us wanted to be stuck in the house together from March through May until the restrictions started getting lifted a little bit more, at least here in Knoxville. My stepson wanted to finish his junior year with his buddies at school. And frankly, Matt and I kind of enjoyed being empty nesters a little bit too, But fortunately, we have a great relationship with Miles, our oldest. And so there was nothing that was unpleasant or, anything like that. But I think it was just also kind of a patience builder for all of us. He's almost at the age where he's ready to be independent, and and we want to encourage that. And at the same time, we're kind of all just in this house together trying to figure out how to make this work when we haven't lived as three adults in the household for quite some time. So just, that's all good stuff. That's all character building, family stretching stuff, but it's just one more layer that gets added on to all the other stresses, right? And then I think at the university level, I think I'm obviously being stretched in my job. I am on the senior leadership team of Johnson, and so I'm on the team that has the privilege of getting to make the big decisions that affect these students and their families, and we take that very seriously, of course. And so lots of conversations, lots of prayer, and lots of meetings, lots of Zoom meetings to try to figure out the best things to do for the university that can help it be, long-term sustainable, but also address the short-term crisis. So, yeah, those are kind of the things that spring to mind.
I appreciate your candor. And again, I've always enjoyed that about you. And it is true. The pandemic was this ability to expose the underbelly. It exposed if companies were weak financially, it accelerated the weakness and exposed it. If the church was weak in a local community and in a local setting of worship, it exposed that. If there were strengths, it brought those too to bear. And so how are you confronting the anger? Let's get personal here. How are you growing in Jesus with that anger? I will identify with you, and I think if most people were very, very, in America right now, honest with themselves, there's probably 2 or 3 things you could touch that and it'd be sensitive. So we're all there with you, Jennifer. I am. How do we get better at that instantaneous anger, that where did that come from kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wish I had just a magic answer, because then I wouldn't be struggling with it anymore. I think that we can, and I don't want to sound overly spiritual or Pollyanna or just reduce this to like a little soundbite, but really for me, it's remembering that in the end, Christ has reconciled all things to himself, and that includes all of us who claim to follow him. And so he has already reconciled to himself that person or that group of people with whom I am so angry. Now, it doesn't mean that I have to agree with them, and it doesn't mean that sometimes I don't want to just flick them in the face, but there is a greater truth that it goes beyond our political or economic realities. That is kingdom. And again, I don't want to sound, I don't want to just be Jesus-y and make it, not a real issue. But I think the anger comes from elevating the importance of some of these issues, and they are important issues, but they are not as big as kingdom. And so for me, it's having to constantly readjust my perspective on what might God be doing, through what to us has seemed an interminable 6 months. This is a microscopic bit of the history of what God is doing in the world. And so what might he be doing through this time? How can I be part of it in some kind of constructive way? And then, on my bad days, I just withdraw. I don't go on social media. I avoid the people that I'm frustrated with. That's better than being unkind. Mm-hmm. And so I think also just giving ourselves a little bit of grace to feel what we feel. In our family, we always talk about you're allowed to feel anything you feel. What you choose to do with those feelings. You have to take ownership for your actions, but your feelings are crazy and uncontrollable, and they are what they are. So if there's certain days where I just can't even with all of it, I just don't. I just step away. So I don't know how healthy that is, but again, I think it's probably healthier than just blasting people on Facebook. So
I have a 2-year-old granddaughter who's in pre-nursery, and one of the things they tell the little ones when there is a struggle over the position, when they want to get a toy or want food, the mantra is walk away. Just walk away. And better than hitting, better than some other reaction. And so it's biblical. Joseph walked away. Actually, he ran away from a struggle and a temptation. And so I think that's quite justified. And then I love what he actually was a former Muslim in California, second-gen gentleman who later became a follower of Jesus and now a church planter, said these 3 things, Jennifer. I loved it. I want to camp because you're good at this. He said, number 1, we have to have them in community before we get them into Christ. Number two, they have to belong before they believe. And number three, he was talking about giving. He said, let's just get them to tip before they tithe. And I love all three of those. And I want to just talk a little bit about that element of community and belonging a little bit. In our situation right now, there is the racial, there is the political, and now even the environmental that's coming up into our dialogue. How can we help people to belong and feel like, as a person of faith, I don't agree with you or I don't know you yet, but what are ways that you're finding that we can create this community and or create this belonging with people before we ever get them to the next steps? Because that's ultimately our journey, right? Is to get them to know the same Jesus we know and love. So if they don't.
Well, there's a lot of thoughts going on in my head. Well, you mentioned earlier that the pandemic has kind of revealed some things that were there before, with businesses and with churches. And I think one of the things that's revealed with the church is that we are not anywhere near as homogeneous as we thought that we were in terms of our beliefs on a wide variety of things. And many of them political, but also our understandings of the gospel and what the church is here for, and the nature of the church, the purpose and mission of the church. So I think this is a real opportunity for senior leaders, pastors, and other senior leaders in the church to really step up. And I hope that some of them will, because I don't think that the type of community that you're talking about can be created through, it has to start at the top. It can't be created through small group experiences or come to this ladies' Bible study or do Awana. Those are all fine. But when there's fun, what I struggle with is that how do I be in community with somebody at my church with whom I am 100% opposed to so many of the things that they not only consider to be important, but they have actually, it's part of their value system. And I'm like now finding I disagree with part of their value system and what they would consider their morality or their way of following Jesus. Those are really huge issues that I think are being surfaced by all of this. And I'm not even saying, we all think we're right, but I'm not even saying that you necessarily have to qualitatively assess the value of those opinions, but just the acknowledgement that all of them are there. I was on a Zoom call with some leaders recently where they were talking about how you think about how many issues there are, and then you think about how many different nuances there are to those issues, and then you do the math and you realize that it's almost statistically impossible that you're going to become friends with somebody who thinks exactly the way you do on every single issue. There's just too many variations and we're all too different. So I think the challenge for senior leaders in the church, for pastors and for other people who are trying to lead these communities in the wake of all of this, is to be leaders and to step above the fray of any particular issue. And I'm not talking about you don't speak truth. I'm not talking about you don't take a stand or whatever. But we can't welcome people in to that kingdom, to that Jesus higher plane, if belonging means you also have to, be in lockstep with 16 other positions, because it's just not going to happen. And what's going to happen if we do that is we're going to have churches of 10 people. And then 2 of those are going to get mad at each other, and then it's going to be a church of 6 people, right? So we have to find some ways coming out of this to, one, I think, refocus people on mission and kingdom, but to do so in a way that also acknowledges there are very significant issues that we have strong disagreements about. And we should be modeling how to talk about those things. We should be modeling as the church how to love each other despite disagreements. If we can't do it, nobody's going to do it. So I think this is a call to our leaders to step up, and I really hope some of them do.
Well, I remember my grandfather-in-law, a farmer in Missouri, who very pragmatically said this one time on an issue that I didn't agree with on someone else. And he said this to me as a young married man: Mike, it's okay. Just know this, that if both of you thought exactly the same on everything, one of you is expendable. God loves the diversity. That's what he relishes in, actually. And statistically, as you said, we're not going to get alignment on everything, but that's okay. I don't have to agree, but I do have to love at the end of the day. That is the command. I am commanded to love. I'm not commanded to agree. And so I'd love to continue to visit with you, but I see our time is running. What words of wisdom in addition to the leadership stepping up so the rest of us, and some of us ourselves, can model and then emulate those good examples, but what other words are you seeing in the church and saying, hey, these are on my heart today? This is what I'd love to share as we close up.
Well, I guess it would just be a variation of what I just shared. And I suppose that's kind of a cop out or maybe a little bit boring, but I do think that this is going to be kind of a BC AD moment for the 21st century church. I think we're going to talk about pre-COVID and post-COVID attendance numbers, pre-COVID and post-COVID trends, or maybe it's pre-2020 and post-2020 because it's bigger than COVID, as we've talked about here. And so I think I'm waiting to see how that plays out as much as anybody. I certainly don't have any crystal ball, but I do think that there is going to be a need for churches to really radically rethink what they're doing. There's going to be some people who, if the doors aren't already open to their church, the minute the doors open, they're going to be there ready to come in. But honestly, I think there's some other people who've spent the last 6 months not doing church and maybe won't return. And so that forces us to ask some really tough questions about why not? If people were away from it and didn't miss it, what does that tell us? And I'm not talking about entertainment. I'm talking about if they can be away from the body for 6 months and it really doesn't matter to them, then what does that need to change in how we do life as a body together? And again, I'm asking questions, I'm not answering them, but those are the types of questions I think that we need to be grappling with as leaders. Things that have been lost during this time that aren't missed either aren't needed or they need to be changed.
Yeah. Good words. Jennifer Johnson, thank you. Blessings to you and the work at that intersection that you very humbly stand at between a community of students and the parents and churches that send them there at Johnson University. Blessings to the leadership there and to you, to your family as well. Thank you for your just humble and yet honest response to some things I'm always enjoy visiting with you. I've always done that. And so thank you for some of your valuable time today. And so from all of us to all of you, we hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Jennifer Johnson. And that if you have, you may be also able to share it on a positive way, your social media channels. And we are really, really thankful that you gave us some of your time as well. And there's also a podcast version as well. So till next time, again, we hope that all of you have a great day and that you will, if you're a person of faith, will have that faith greater than any fear. Thank you and God bless.